welcome back to the shed. So it's a chilly November night, got a fire going, and we're going to start working on our next project. We are going to make a sporran. It's a Scottish kilt bag. I'm not an expert, but I've done some YouTube research and some Etsy research and Googling, and if the internet has taught me anything, it's that with enough Googling, you can become an expert in anything. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you an image of what these things look like from my little research here, and then we'll get to making it. So, just hang tight and we'll see where this goes. See you in a sec. Okay, so for this, we're going to be doing a little bit of freehand work today. I have this really beautiful leather that I got from Tandy, I want to say maybe half a year ago or so. And so with, I honestly do not remember the name of this leather, but it looks like it's about, I want to say maybe a 3 or 4 ounce, and it has this really nice pull up. So it's going to make for just a beautiful, beautiful bag. And so the way that we're going to start off is, first make sure I've got all my tape and junk out of the way. We're going to start by doing a bit of a measurement kind of thing. So 1 second here. Okay, we're going to need our scratch awl. We will eventually need, of course, our stitching chisels, our thread, needle, that kind of thing. But in the very beginning, scratch awl, pen, and paper. Those are going to be the essentials right now. Okay, so here is the design that we're going to go with. So we're going to go, oh, you know what? I need a Sharpie. 1 sec. Okay, so here's the design that we're going to run with. So it's going to be about 8 inches across the top, and it's going to be about 9 inches tall. Okay, it's going to have a curve at the bottom, and we're going to have a 2-inch gusset, and we're going to have, so the front flap is going to be like this, and then we're going to have our gusset, and then we're going to have the back panel, which will be the same second piece, just like this one, and then we're going to have a flap. So we're going to do a flap that's going to go across here. It'll have to be at least 2 inches to maybe like 1.5 inches to cover the distance of the gusset, and then a curve from there. So if we're going 8 inches tall, 9 inches tall, then if we come down about 4 inches, so if we make this whole thing 5 inches for our flap, that should give us enough room for covering the distance on our gusset and enough room for our flap to come down and still be useful. Now on the front of the bag, we're going to have some tassels. And from my Google image searches, the middle one is longer than the side ones. And on the flap, so the so this whole flap, we're going to have rabbit fur. Okay. And I saw this really cool design that I'm going to try and emulate, where I'm thinking, once we got our rabbit fur, on our front, we'll do this, like a basic outline in leather, and then a cross hatching, like this, in like 1-inch strips or 1/2-inch strips, something like that. So we'll have a crisscross pattern, and so this will be leather, this will be leather, you'll have like this leather stripping kind of thing, right? And then in the center is going to be rabbit fur. Okay, so I'll put a link in the description of this video to the Weaver Leather Supply Chuck Dorset video where I saw that design, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. I want to do something kind of like that. So the first step is going to be to get our base pieces cut out. So what I'm going to do is, if I want my front piece to be 8 inches wide and 9 inches tall with a curve at the bottom, I'm actually going to be making it 8.5 wide and then 9.5 tall, because then I can use a 1/4 inch for my stitching guide in order to for the like a 1/4 inch for the spacing for the stitches to go right from the edge here, right? And then once I have this piece, I can then measure out how long that is, and then I can get our gusset made. So let's get to it. Okay, so basically at this point, in order to make this go smoothly, I'm going to cut a, let's call it 10 inches by 11 inches square. And that way I'll have more than enough room to kind of work within, and I'm not doing all of my tracing on the big side of leather, right? I'll be just doing my little piece here. So I'm going to draw, so I'm just going to mark this down here. So I want to do a 10-inch by 11 rectangle. Okay, so I will be back in a minute when I get that done. Alright, and we're back. So I have a couple of scrap end pieces, and I just want to show this off again. Like, check out this pull-up. This leather. It's just beautiful leather. Like, I need to make more things with this leather. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to set this aside, because I'm going to be using this for the tassel, for other pieces. This is a fair sized chunk of scrap here, and we'll find ways to use this on this project. But I have now 2 panels, one for the front and for the back, and you can see on the ruler here they are 10 inches by 11 inches. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by marking out a couple things. So we said that we wanted it to be about 8.5 across the top and 9.5 down the bottom. So 8.5 across the top, that means that I want to go, so if I go 1/2 in here and half an inch here. Then that would give me 9. So the simplest way to do it is going to be actually, you know what? Let's do this. Okay, so I'm going to measure 8.5. Okay, so there's my 8.5 here at this corner here. And then if I measure 9 down from this corner, then go to 9.5. That's there. Okay, and then if I do an 8.5 by 9.5, so that's that spot there. Okay, so on my letter here, I've marked out, I've got one spot up here at the top, and then one spot here, and then one spot here. So these are my 3 corners. And this is going to give me a strip that we'll be able to use when we start getting into doing those cross strips later. So this is a really good start. Now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to take my straight edge. I'm going to measure a third point at 8.5 from our center here. Let's see here. Actually, hold on. Make sure I got this right. Yeah, so my 8.5, I'll do a third, 8.5 mark here. And I'm going to scratch a line straight down along that mark. Okay, so this is here, and then I'm going to mark a 9.5 from the top, do another one in the middle, there we go. So now this is 8.5 by 9.5. Now, with a sporran, the corners are not straight edges. They're curved towards the bottom, right? So we are going to accomplish that by using some rounded shapes. So I think this is going to work out perfectly for us. A spool of speaker wire. Actually, you know what? I have something better. Here is a cardboard spool from a 3D printer, plastic wire spool that I got from somewhere on Facebook. So, if I center this so that I've got the curve is on both edges here. Okay, so I do a light mark along the curve. And then there's one of the bottom curves. And then if I do along here, so I've got the edge of these curves lining up. Okay. Oh, I know. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. So from this corner to the start of that curve is 3 inches. Okay. So if I measure 3 inches and I make my curve hit at my 3-inch mark. Okay, so up here, this was 3.5 inches at the top. So if I measure 3.5, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the curve of my spool hit my 3.5 at the top and 3-inch mark at the bottom. There we go. And there is our shape for the bag. So that's going to give us a symmetrical enough shape, and that will be deep enough that you're going to be able to carry basically any kind of cell phone, keys, wallet, whatever. And this will give us more than enough of a width in order to have our stitching allowances all the way around. Perfect. So now, let's do the same thing with this one. So, the good news is we can just do the same activity here. So, I said that I measured out 8.5, right? So, 8.5 across the top. And then 9.5 towards the bottom. 9.5. And then 8.5. Eight and a half in the middle here. 9.5 in the middle here. So we're going to mark this straight line here, and we're going to mark this straight line here, and we're going to go 3.5 from the bottom, and 3.5 from the bottom, and then 3 in from each of our corners. And then that's the spots to hit with our curve. Okay, so now we are going to have two symmetrical bags that we are going to be front and back that we can go from there. Now, just to be perfectly safe, let me just measure the middle distance here. It's 2.5 in the middle. Okay, perfect. So we're going to cut this out, and then we shall go from there. Okay. Couple little spots to finish up here. There we go. Perfect. So now we have ourselves front and a back to our bag. Okay. So the way that we're going to be doing this bag is on our back, we're also going to be having a flap, like a small pocket for a cell phone to go in. On the front, I'm actually going to have rabbit fur, and then we're going to be having the, so we're going to have rabbit fur, and then we're going to have our straight line, like our strips, coming through. Now, the rabbit fur, I've never worked with rabbit fur before, and I'm going to be going to the store tomorrow to buy the rabbit fur, so I'm not exactly sure what I'm getting into, but I'm going to assume that rabbit fur, the back of the rabbit fur is probably not going to be very good to use as a structure. We're probably going to want to glue the rabbit fur onto the leather and use the leather as like a backing material, right? So that leads me to our next step, which is going to be deciding, are we going to have this finished side be all outside, all inside? How are we going to do this? For sure, I want the finished side on the back to be facing to the back. And for sure, you know what, this particular leather, it has a really smooth inside. I don't need to do any extra preparation work to it, so I like this on the outside. You know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to rough this up, and then we'll glue the rabbit fur on top. And that'll leave us with our two finished sides here, kind of thing, right? Alright, now we are at the stage where we do need to figure out this length in order to make our gusset, because we can cut the gusset pieces out. So let's see here. Let's try this method. Okay, so if I start here at the top of my square, okay, let's try doing it like this. So if I start up here at the top, and then I roll it down this way, okay? So if I start at the top, and I roll it this way, that comes in at just a hair under 23 inches. So let me do this so that the camera can pick it up, okay? So I'm going to start up at the top, and then I roll it down. That gets me in at, now that one was 23 and a half. So let me try this again. Let me make sure I got this right. Okay, so if I start up here, and I roll it this way, now I'm at 24. Okay, let me try that again. Let me just do this again. If I do it enough times, eventually I'll get the same number, right? Yeah, 24. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut a gusset to 20. See, I want to be a little longer than necessary because I'd rather have a little extra to work with. So I'm going to go 25, maybe 26 inches. Yeah, I'm going to do 26 inches. Okay. So if I do 26 divided by 2 is 13. And if I do a French seam at the bottom, then that, and if I do a 1-inch French seam, 1-inch allowance for the French seam, so that would be 14. So if I cut two 14-inch strips, and then I do a French seam, so a French seam is where you take this strip and this strip, you sew them together, and then you double them up like that. And so what you do is you sew these two pieces together in the middle, and you fold them down on each other, and then you sew a line this way. And then what you can also do with a French seam as well is you can put another piece like on the inside on top in order to add a little bit of structure or like an extra strength if you feel like you really need it. Because this bag is not going to need to carry water, I'm not too worried about it being watertight. So that's the only drawback to a French seam is you do have like a gap in here, right? So anyway, if I do two 14-inch strips, then that gives me more than enough to do my French seam. So, okay, are these strips 14 inches? No, they're not, because they were from a 10 by 11. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use these for my tassels then. Is this piece of scrap 14? I think I can get my 14 inches out of here. Okay, so let's start with marking a straight line with the scratch awl. Okay. There. And then 14. Oh, you know what? Okay, so if I do, so this will get me to 13 and a half. Okay, what if I did this way? I definitely, okay, let's do it this way. So, if I start by marking out, so I'll give me 14. That's going to come up a little bit short there. Okay, so I may wind up having to use another piece off of my larger piece of leather. That's okay. So, well, hold on. Okay, so if I did, you know what? I don't think I need a full inch for my French seam allowance. I could probably do half an inch. That would let me get away with doing 13 and a half. Because if I do this, that is 13 and a half there. Okay. So there's my 13 and a half. And remember, my 26 was also going a little extra, right? So 13 and a half is probably going to be plenty. So then if I do 13 and a half, go down another 2 inches. It is really convenient having this carpenter framing square because I know this side is always 2 inches. I know this side is 1.5 inches. It makes measurements like this a lot simpler. Okay, so there we are. So there is our two gusset pieces. And then I'll go in by my 1/4 inch. Yeah, it'll work out. It'll work out. Okay, so let's cut this piece out. Okay, there we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mark our stitching line along here. So this, I've got it set to about a 1/4 inch. Yeah, about a 1/4 inch. And I could probably go, yeah, 1/4 inch looks about right. So I just go along. See, another thing I really love about this cut of leather, and if I ever find the name of this leather, I'll find a way to share it, put a link to it or something, because this is scratching up with my compass and my scratch holes. Like, this is just marking up beautifully. Okay, so there's my 2 stitch lines here. There's my stitch line there. And then for the French seam, I'm going to do 1 on both sides here. Okay. And then I'm going to go in a second one after that. There. Okay. So when I sew these together, it'll be like that. Now I can see already I've made a small error in that one of these is a little wider than the other one. So let's fix that now. It looks like it's basically the same along the same line as my marks, about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to cut this off here. So let's cut along our line here with our straight edge. Yeah, that makes sense because this is a 2 inches. It's just a little over 2 inches wide here. Okay. You know what they say, measure twice and cut once, right? Okay. Now, I go back and mark this stitch line back across the top. Okay, and voila, they line up perfectly. Okay, so in order, so now the next step is going to be punching all this out. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to figure out where the center line is on the bag, and then kind of go around from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, so I can tell right at a glance, we are going to have extra on our gusset across the top here. You see that there? Like, it's going to have extra at the top. But that is okay, because we can trim that off, or if there's extra, we can use it as like a little bit of a flap in order to help keep some of the contents inside your bag so they don't flop around a little bit. Having a little extra at the top is not the end of the world. We can get around that. We can work with that. So let's mark our stitching line on the front and the back panels. Oops. And here we go. Okay, so there's one done. And here is two done. Okay, there we go. So at this point, what I'm going to do is, oh yeah, in the back one, we're also going to put a stitching line across the top so that we can attach our flap, right? So let's do that on here. This will be our back. Okay. Now another thing that this particular client wanted was a pocket on the back for their cell phone. So the way that we're going to do that is, so imagine this is the flap for the pocket. It's going to go like that, and it's going to have a little tiny, like a little, like 1 inch, a half an inch gusset down at the bottom, and it'll go up to about maybe 1.5 inches at the top, and it's going to be done kind of like this. And I want to use a more flexible leather for that gusset because it's going to be going up and down and in and out a bunch of times, right? So for that, we are going to, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to wait until I see what color of rabbit fur I get from Tandy tomorrow, because that's going to determine what color of leather I use, whether I use some more brown or some gray, because I do have some flexible leather that would be perfect for that job. Here, I'll show you up here. See, up there, I've got some gray and some brown hanging off the top of the rack there, right? So, what we're going to do from here is I'm going to work on punching all these out. I'm going to find my center point here. So you start at the center point and then work your way up. That way we know that we have a center point for where our French seam is going to line up. And then we go from there. So I'm going to pause the video here and I'll come back to you in a minute once I've got this all punched out. Alright, so we are back and I have successfully punched all of our holes. And so I forgot with the French seam, it's not just 2 lines, it's 3. So we'll see how that turns out. I have faith, But basically, when we go to sew it together, we're going to sew the middle seam together, and then we fold it over, and then this one and this one get together. So you're going to wind up with these 2 folded like that. Okay. And so the center stitch there is going to line up with our center mark here. So it'll work out. I have faith. I have faith. So the next step is on our back panel. Before we start sewing anything together, I want to make my life easier, and we're going to do some pre-assembly steps here next. So we need a couple of things. We need to go digging through my hardware drawer. So this is where I keep all my rings and buckles and things. So let's use a couple of 1-inch, I think this is looks like brass, either brass or bronze. I can never tell the difference between the two. Looks like brass. But some 1-inch brass D-rings, like that. There we go. That way, when they go to hook this onto their belt around the kilt, they have somewhere to hook into. Perfect. Now, in order to do that, we need to get, remember how we did the strips earlier? These are going to come in handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do like a little loop. Okay, kind of like that. And then we're going to do a rivet and a stitch line. And that way it'll all be good and super secure. So these are, let me just triple check to make sure that these are 1 inches. Yes, yep, they are 1 inch. So I need to cut 2 strips that are, let's say 2.5 inches, because that will give me a 1/2 inch for the overlap and then a full inch on either side. So let's start with that. So I want to get 2.5 inches by 1 inch. I need 2 of those strips. Okay. So let's put away our drawer here. All right. So so 2.5 there. So there's 2.5 there, and then 2.5 there, and then we need to cut them down to 1 inch. So 1 inch is there. There. And there. Okay. So let's scratch out our 1 inch line here. Okay, so here's our 2 pieces that we need. So a couple quick cuts. One, and let's make this one here, and there. Okay, perfect. So now, when we go to put our rings on here, we just put that through there. We have all kinds of meat here to put our rivet, and to do a quick stitch line around it, just to, you know what, actually, instead of doing the, yeah, you know what, let's just do a straight stitch line. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do a straight stitch line. If I do, how about that? So if we do this, you know what? No. Here's what we're gonna do. Aha, I gotcha. I gotcha. Okay, I have just the tool for this. I knew I bought these for a reason. I have these round end punches, so I'm gonna find one that will line up to be the right size, and then I'll cut off the edges, and that'll give me a rounded edge, and that'll look real nice and sharp. Okay, so back in a flash. Okay, so I gotta use those round end punches, and I've got this nice, real sharp looking soft rounded edge on here. So if you are in the market for those round end punches, I bought them just off of like a random AliExpress dealer. You know, for a basic cheap tool, I'm quite happy with it. So now what we're going to do is, I changed my mind. What I am going to do is we're going to do a rivet towards the end of our round piece, and then we're going to do our belt loop. And so once I rivet it onto the back of the bag, I'm also going to do a stitch line just beside the rivet. So I'm going to do the rivet like here. Okay, like just enough to say that's got a little bit of bite on it and still give us room for our stitching line. And that way, with between the pop rivet and the stitching line, there's no way this thing's going to pop off on us. So in order to make sure we got our spacing, our sizing right, I'm going to take my rotary tool, and I'm going to make sure that the size of the rivet post that I'm trying to punch is going to line up with the size of the hole. So that one's a little too narrow. So let's click around here. Let's see if that one will do. There we go. That one's a perfect fit. So this is the one we're going to use. Now, on these loops, okay, I'm going to want it to be, see if I can get this in the shot here. If I, about there, that'll give it a little bit of meat around the edges to still catch, and it's towards the end, so that I still have more than enough room for the ring and my stitching line. So I'm going to start off with that. Okay. And the second one, here we are. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. There we go. So now that rivet is just going to go in like that. Perfect. Okay. Now we need to measure out where to do it on the back of the bag. So here's my thoughts. We have our hole punched on the strap end here. Now, if I do it too high, then I like the idea of doing it kind of like that, because then you'll have, yeah, I don't want it all the way out here, because then it's going to be sort of in, well, I suppose we could do it all the way. So there's two ways you could do this. One way would be to just sew the flap like that, onto the edge. That could be one way to do it. But because we're going to do the rivet, I want to go a little in here. So in order to make sure that it's not too high, not too low, I figure let's use some rough measurements here. So if we go like this, and like this, that, there, and then if I go back, so if I make it here, so remember we're still going to have our pocket for the cell phone to deal with, and I don't want this like too far in and it's going to interfere with the cell phone. But here, that is going to be far enough away from our cell phone pocket that will work. So in order to have the same spacing on both sides, if we go 1 over, 1 down, and then on the corner. So about there. And then if we go 1 over, 1 down, and on the corner. And that is going to work out to, let's use our measuring tools here. So that's going to work out to 1.5 inches in, 2 down, and then 1.5 inches in, and about 2 down. Okay, perfect. Now, can my rotary tool reach that? That's the next question. So, aha, what do you know? Perfect distance for the rotary punch. There we go. Okay, so now we can put our post in from behind. We can put our ring through our loop. And we can put the loop on top of the post. That is not looking too shabby. And then that still gives us lots of room for me to go back in here with the stitching chisels and do one quick seam line there in order to sew it in, and we're all set. So I'll be back in a moment. Alright, and we're back. So what I did was, so most of these stitches doing with a 4mm spacing. These ones I did with the 3mm because I wanted to have one overhanging and then 4 through the middle of that strap, just to make sure that it's going to be super securely in there. And I also forgot to put my punching pad back down on my granite block, so I've now dulled this chisel. So it's a good thing I'm going to Tandy tomorrow so I can replace that for a few dollars. Alright, so now we have our rivets on, and these are ready to get sewn up. Perfect. Now let's figure out how big we want our cell phone pocket to be. So, my cell phone, it's a brick of a phone. It's bigger than most phones. Any pocket that's designed for this specific phone is going to be too big for the vast majority of phones. However, by the time you add a case on most phones, it's going to wind up being similar. And you can see here that if we do a flap, like a pocket for our phone, so let's say we do it, this is about right, about centered here. So, okay, this is our center line. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So if I go 7. That's about centered. Okay. And so let's make our cell phone pocket, say, 4 inches of a flap, so 4 inches wide. And what I want to do is I want to make it so that it can kind of go up and over and then snap together at the top here with a couple of magnet snaps. So if I make it, so our total bag here is about 9.5. So if I make our cell phone pocket about 8 inches, okay, so if we go, so if I do 4 inches wide, so 2 is there, and then 2 from our center line there. Okay. So that means that we are about 3. Okay, so this is my 3-inch mark. That is my 3-inch mark. Actually, 1, 2, 3. So what I want, okay, so if this is 9.5 and I want to do 4, so if I do 1, 2, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So where is my center line here? Okay, so 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. So this is my center line here. So if I want to go, so I want to go 2. Okay, so there's my 2, and there's my 2. So if I want to do 4 inches wide, so that's my 4-inch mark here, and this is my 4-inch mark here. Okay. Which more or less lines up. Okay, so if I, so basically what I want to do is I want to have a pocket, like a flap here, that'll wind up being about 4 wide by about 8 long, because it's going to wind up being, yeah, because like like a typical cell phone is going to wind up being around a 7-inch tall. So having an extra inch to close up as a top there. Okay, so I need a 4 by 8 rectangle. That shouldn't be too hard to make. Right? Maybe it will be a little hard to make. Okay. Oh, I just had an idea. let's get a little artsy. So I've got a strip here that will hit our 8-inch mark, and it's about 2 wide. I've got a strip here. Okay, so I've got a couple of strips here. So this is 1.5 inches wide. And this is 1.5 inches wide. So that would get me to 3 inches. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do 8 inches long by 1.5 inches on these two sides here. And then we're going to do another 8-inch long by 1 inch, and we're going to overlap it so that way it'll be like, it'll look like this. So you'll have like a raised spine across the top that sews the strips together. Yeah, and that'll work. That'll work, and it'll add a little bit of extra flair to our piece, so it's not just single slabs of leather. Okay, awesome. So let's measure out 8 inches. Okay, so this. So here's my 8. Okay. Here's my 8. Okay. And then here's my 8. And here's my 8. Okay, so we are cooking. Okay, so there's our first one. There's our second one. Okay, and then let's use this one. And we'll go 1 inch. Okay, so we need, so I need to get to 4. And I'm at 3. So if I do 1.5 inches, which is basically what this is. So I just need to cut this to 8. Okay. So let's okay. So we are going to have 3 1.5 inch wide, roughly, by 8 inch tall, and we're going to overlap them like this. Okay. And then that's going to get us to our width of the 4 inches that we need. And that will be enough room for a cell phone to fit in. More than enough room, actually. Okay, perfect. So, now we just need to mark our stitching lines along here. Okay, so this is going to be the middle one. So basically, I'm going to do stitching lines across the bottom for our bottom end of the gusset and along both of the sides. Okay. There we go. So we're going to be doing something like that. Perfect. Now the next bit is when we put our magnets on the top, the magnets are going to be poking through and need to have something across the top to cover the little metal tabs that poke through. So what we're going to do is after I get this sewn up, we're going to do another measurement, and I'll do a 1 inch across there. So let's plan on, well, we're going to need a stitching line across the top anyway, so let's plan on that. Okay, and then we'll put our 2 magnets there, and then once we sew the top across, we'll punch through into the bottom, and then we're all set. Alright, so time to get these punched out. Okay, so what I've done is I have punched out my stitching lines on these 3 pieces. They're going to go together like that. And on the back, I used my marker to write left, center, and right. So that way, when I go and put them together again, I'm going to be able to remember how they go, because there is what I did was I punched the same number of stitching holes on the centers on that inner side piece. So it's going to go like that. Okay. So at this point, let's just do a bit of a recap of what we've got done so far tonight. We have the back panel punched out, and we've got our rings riveted on. We've started getting our panel for our flap for our foam pocket ready, and we have our front flap, and we have the pieces for the gusset where we're going to do our French seam. Okay, cool, making sense so far, right? Now, the next steps are going to be sewing this panel together for our phone, marking out and punching out our 4-inch by 8-inch, like marking out our spot here where we want our pocket for the phone to go. And then we're going to use another flexible leather to go between this flap and that flap kind of thing. And we still need to put the rabbit fur on the front, and we're still going to do our cross braces, and we still need to make our top flap, and we still need to sew it all together. So it's now 11:30 at night on a Saturday night. I think this is a pretty good progress start from here. So this will be the end of our part 1 video. And once I come back from the Tandy store and I have my rabbit fur picked out and I know what color that's going to be, then we will start picking out our thread color and go from there. So thank you very much for coming out here to another video here in the shed. Really appreciate it, and I will see you soon. Safe travels.